Japan is a great place to ride, and if you're thinking about getting yourself a pair of wheels, you might be thinking, how much is this going to cost me? Well, the answer is a bit complicated. It really depends on the kind of bike you're going to get. So in this video, I'm going to try and take you through all the rules and the costs associated with each bike. So maybe that'll help you figure out which bike is the best one for your budget. So if we're going to divide bikes into categories by expense, in Japan we're going to end up with 4 categories. Let's go through each one, starting with the small bikes. As you may know, the era of Japanese 50cc bikes is coming to an end. These little engines just don't heat up the catalytic converter enough to meet the new emission standards. Now, of course, they could develop a 50cc engine that could do that, but that would cost a lot of money. So what Japanese manufacturers are doing instead are simply modifying the 125cc platforms to meet the new standards and limit the power output to 4 kilowatts. So now you can ride a 125cc bike with just a car license or a scooter license. But don't think you're just going to be able to go out and jump on a Yamaha XSR 125 or the even cooler looking Svartbilen 125, because only the newly manufactured power limited models are going to qualify. And anyway, those bikes have a few limitations, like you can't ride them on the highways, they're subject to a few quirky road rules in Japan. But if you are still interested in those bikes, here are the costs you can be looking at. One good thing is that you can ride with just a car license or a very easy to get scooter license. And you can even ride a manual transition bike even if you only have an auto transmission car license. So that's one thing you won't have to pay for. These are also probably the only vehicles on Japan's roads that aren't subject to the vehicle weight tax. You will, however, have to pay the light vehicle tax, and that's every year. Now, if your bike is under 90cc, you'll pay 2,000 yen. But above 90cc and up to 125cc, you'll pay a flat 2,400 yen. Next is your compulsory liability insurance. Now, 1 year policy is around 6,900 yen for a 125cc or smaller bike, but you can buy a 5-year policy for a total of 13,310 yen, which works out to be about 2,660 yen per year. The only problem with the 5-year deal is if you do sell your bike before the 5 years is up, it's a bit of a hassle to get the insurance money back. And finally, we have the voluntary insurance. Now, this is not required by law, but it is a good idea as it's quite cheap at around 10,000 yen per year. Right, let's get to the next category, which is the 126cc to 250cc bikes. Now, these bikes can be ridden on all roads just with a standard motorcycle license, and their biggest selling point is they don't have to undergo the biannual vehicle inspection known as the shock-in. Popular bikes in this category are the Honda CB250R, the Yamaha MT25, and the Suzuki Gixxer 250. Or if you like cruiser bikes, the number one in Japan, of course, is the Honda Rebel 250, coming soon with e-clutch. The Kawasaki Ninja is always popular, and the ZX25R even gives you 4 cylinders for maximum performance without a shock-in. If you want some off-road capability, the Honda CRF 250L is the top seller in Japan, or if you're happy with a second-hand bike, the Yamaha Cero 250 is very popular, although they stopped making them in 2020, another victim of emission standards. If you're looking for an adventure bike, the big two are the Kawasaki Versys X250 and the Honda V-Strom 250, otherwise known as the DL250 or the Baby Strom. The Indian-made V-Strom SX is also another budget-friendly choice. Now, this class of bike has to pay the vehicle weight tax. Now, vehicle weight tax is usually paid every time you have a shock-in, but since this bike doesn't need a shock-in, you'll just pay it once when you buy the bike, and that's a flat 4,900 yen. Since it's only paid once, I'm not going to include it as a yearly cost. The light vehicle tax for this kind of bike is 3,600 yen per year. Next is the compulsory liability insurance, or Jibaiseki Hoken as it's called in Japanese, and like with small bikes, you can choose coverage from 12 months to 60 months. So if you pay for 1 year, that'll be 7,100 yen, but if you go for the 5-year deal, it'll work out to be 2,840 yen per year. And finally, we have voluntary or comprehensive insurance. Now, this insurance covers what compulsory insurance doesn't. For example, damage to your bike or third-party property damage, and most important of all, personal injury. Now the premiums are flat regardless of your engine size, but the rates may vary by rider age and history. But as a ballpark figure, a typical policy is going to run you around 100,000 yen per year if you're a younger or higher risk rider. It is expensive, but it's indispensable. Don't forget the National Health System does not cover injuries from motorcycle accidents, so if you do get injured without insurance, you'll be leaving hospital with a limp and a big bill. So let's move on to the next category of bikes, the 251cc to 400cc bikes. Now you can ride these bikes anywhere on a standard license again, but unfortunately they are subject to the biannual vehicle inspection known as the shock-en. Popular bikes in this category include the Kawasaki Eliminator, which is a very popular cruiser, and it's closely followed by Honda's GB350. The Kawasaki Z400 and the Ninja 400 bikes are popular along with Yamaha's MT3 and the Yamaha YZR3 and also Honda's CB400R. If you want to stand out a bit, you could go for a Husqvarna Vitbilen 401 or a Svartbilen 401, or one of the 400cc offerings from Triumph. Adventure riders could check out Honda's NX400 or KTM's 390 Adventure, if you can still find a dealership. Anyway, let's go over the costs. So for your vehicle weight tax, once you get above 251cc, the tax is the same, so it doesn't matter if you have a 400cc, a 600cc, or even a 2000cc machine. It's about 1,900 yen per year. But if you do have an older bike, for example over 13 years old, you're going to pay 2,300 yen. And once you go over 18 years old, you'll pay 2,500 yen, so a little bit more expensive for an older bike. Next up, your light vehicle tax, that's a flat 6,000 yen per year. When it comes to compulsory liability insurance, you have the option to buy up to 3 years at once, and that will save you a lot of money, and it'll work out to about 3,500 yen per year. As with the previous category, voluntary or comprehensive insurance is definitely something you should think about for the reasons I mentioned before. And the final and most hated cost you will have to pay is the vehicle inspection cost, otherwise known as the shock-en. You will have to get your first shock-en 3 years after buying a new bike, and then every 2 years after that. Of course, second-hand bikes will have to pay it every 2 years, so if you're buying a second-hand bike, definitely check out how much shock-en is left on it. As far as the cost goes, I can only give some ballpark figures, but if you get your dealer to handle it, you're looking at between 40 and 80,000 yen. So I'll put in 30,000 yen per year as a ballpark figure. Now it is possible to do the shock-en yourself, and it will be much cheaper, but a lot more troublesome. Some Japanese language ability will definitely help if you're going to try it, and you might be able to get it done for 20,000 yen, which means about 10,000 yen per year. Now once you go over 400cc, you're going to need a different kind of license called an all-gata bike license, which obviously means big bike license. Now these licenses were notoriously difficult to get until a few years ago. I have a colleague who took it over 5 times before he passed. Luckily my Australian license converted straight over to a all-gata menkyo, so I didn't have to take the test, otherwise I could have broken that record easily. Anyway, that was in the past, and these days it is supposed to be much easier to get a big bike license. Now, the story among the Japanese is that companies like BMW and Harley-Davidson put some pressure on the Japanese government, saying that their license system was kind of a trade barrier for their big bikes. Anyway, that's the story, but I suspect the Japanese manufacturers had a hand in it too. Selling more big bikes means bigger profits. I'm going to reveal all these figures very quickly because, as you can see, they're pretty much all the same as the last category. One thing I will say is the shock-en tends to be more expensive for big bikes, but not necessarily. Also, big bikes tend to be more valuable and thus more attractive to professional thieves, so you might want to consider theft insurance. But from what I've seen, it doesn't really seem to be worth it. So let's have a look at the totals. When you add up the taxes, liability insurance and shock-en fees, the annual cost difference between an over 250cc bike and an over 400cc bike is surprisingly small. And if you're thinking you have no choice other than to get a 250cc bike because you don't want to pay the shock-en,
Don't forget that even though shock ends can be expensive, they usually include some maintenance and some parts that you'll have to pay for anyway on a 250cc bike. So the cost difference probably isn't that much at all. And after a shock end, you will know that your bike's in good shape and all your road taxes and insurance are in order. So if you've been ruling out a 400cc or bigger bike purely because of the costs, you might want to reconsider. Of course, you'll have to take into account the fuel and maintenance costs, which will vary greatly depending on your bike. Obviously, a Harley-Davidson Road Glide will probably burn more fuel and cost more on parts and maintenance than something like a Honda GB350.
In the end, if you are going to ride, you might as well ride the bike you want instead of worrying about saving a few dollars a year. Anyway, if this video helped you out, please hit that like button, subscribe if you like, and as always, any questions, corrections, comments or insults are always welcome. Till next time, ride safe and thanks for watching.